Hi and welcome to Sapiens Forward. In this video, we're going to answer the question, what is generative AI? This is an important question to anybody who's been hearing that term generative AI and wondering, what is that all about? What are these AI tools and what are they doing? So first off, generative AI refers to any kind of AI tool, machine learning models that are capable of generating new content based on the data that they've been trained on. The key there is right in the term generative, as in it's generating. It's creating something that wasn't quite there before and now you have it in hand. What are some examples of those types of things that generative AI can create? Well, content in the form of text, images, audio, even video, code, like as in programming, and designs and things like that. And there's a variety of tools that are out there that you can use to do these types of generative AI activities. So, of course, we have OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Anthropic's Claude, Microsoft Copilot. Those are some of the biggest names in the generative AI field of products right now. And they all sort of do similar types of things. They can generate text for you. They can create essentially a summary of something that you've input and provided. Maybe even create a Word doc or a PowerPoint from that. It's taking potential input or questions that you provided and providing something back. Now, the most common use cases are people are asking it to provide an answer to a question in text or to write something like a summary in text. But they can also generate imagery. So some of these image models are like DALL-E or Stable Diffusion and products like Midjourney actually create images from the descriptive input of what you're providing that you'd like to see. Code generation seems like it's another form of text, but it's also kind of a language thing on its own. If you're not ever been familiar or educated in programming, it's sort of its own language of itself in order to make software work. And these tools can also work with the code, generate new code for you, or to take code that you've provided and provide adjustments, maybe even fixes to it. It's pretty compelling. So GitHub's Copilot tool is kind of a collaboration with Microsoft and their products, the Copilot product and GitHub, to provide some plugins directly into some of those programming tools that computer science engineers and developers are already using. And also video and animation, kind of a step up from just static image generation, but actual videos. Synthesia is a great example of that, and that technology is still developing. Now, how does this work? So ultimately, these tools, generative AI tools, are an advanced form of machine learning model that's going to create your content based on learned patterns. So learned patterns means ultimately they're going to be trained on large sets of data. And by taking those sets of data, it's simply going to build these patterns into what are kind of a neural net model to understand relationships between different words, phrases, or components of that. Now, once they've been trained on these very large sets of data, they might also incorporate a reinforcement learning pattern. So you might see that if you've tried out any of these tools so far, like ChatGPT, you see the little thumbs up or the thumbs down icons next to the outputs that it's providing. You can provide direct feedback to these AI tools to help those systems understand, was this an appropriate or accurate type of output based on what the query was or what the question was or what you're looking for. And that type of feedback is ultimately stored as part of the understanding that these AI tools develop to develop and create future, to generate future examples of something like that. Now, overall, this process where after training, it has this data that it can draw from to create and generate future types of content. This is the inference phase. So these tools are drawing upon the information that they've been trained on so that they can infer from a probabilistic standpoint what is going to be the most appropriate type of response based on the question. Again, this is all about probabilistic responses and answers, not deterministic, meaning that these are all based on percentages of probabilities of, would this be the correct next word in a sentence that it's generating to answer your question. And from that standpoint, not everybody would get the same result every time. And that's why it's not deterministic. And after these tools are working and generating in that inference phase, there's also the potential for fine-tuning of these systems. So there are more general approaches to generating content. ChatGPT, as an example, generally can provide and generate content on any number of type of topics based on the data that's been trained on. But there's room for some of these models to be further adapted and specialized into specific areas. Like, for example, like an AI tool assistant that could be adapted to specifically provide capabilities for legal document development and things like that. Now, there are certainly some limitations to these types of tools. They're not perfect. They've been in development for several years, and there's plenty of room for them to evolve and grow. But as far as what they can or can't do, or where they might be falling short, for one, ethical concerns are certainly a big topic of late. The idea of fake images is not new. I mean, back in the day, the idea is photoshopping. So people taking images or photos and manipulating them with tools like Adobe Photoshop in a very realistic and sophisticated way to fool many people that some kind of outrageous image was actually real. Well, now that whole kind of process is really just being ramped up a level with AI and some of these generative tools that can make image manipulation more ready to do and do more quickly. The idea of deep fakes is a term out there, using some of these deep learning tools to create just hyper realistic images, even video of people doing things that might be unethical or just really harmful to their brand or their perception. So that is certainly an area of concern, and that kind of sits in the realm of harmful content and misinformation, certainly. And then, the idea of biases. So, the information that these tools are ultimately trained on is going to help them formulate, what kind of areas they can respond to. And if there are gaps or limitations to the data that they're trained on, maybe in particular topics, well, ultimately those AI tools are going to struggle or be completely unable to generate content on those topics that they're missing out on during the training process. And that is ultimately going to be perceived as a bias. For example, if let's say, if you're trying to work with the generative AI tool to develop some material, some content on maybe a historical topic, and those AI tools were never trained on a particular, let's say, ethnic group of people that are central to a particular type of topic in history, well, any kind of content that you ask that tool to generate on the topic is going to completely exclude that ethnic group, which could be pretty harmful or unhelpful at the very least if you're trying to have it generate something that is factual. And factual information is paramount when we're trying to share and communicate information. So that is certainly an area of concern. Quality control matters as well. You may have seen some of the really funny images out there of things that generative AI can create. Sometimes just really not quite getting it, trying to generate an image of the human body. We're all very unique and different in our appearances, but you might see some photos like, oh, I wonder if that's a real photo or AI photo. And then you look and maybe their hand has 8 fingers on it or something like that. Now, of course, there are all types of things when we're born and the human body is being created and grown, that sort of thing. And, maybe everybody's got a little bit of, maybe some folks out there with some extra fingers, but it's not common. And that is one of the clearest cases you can see out there where there's some kind of inaccuracy in generative AI for imagery. Sometimes even videos, just some really crazy types of scenes. So quality control matters. Right now it seems like it's more of kind of a funny thing, but there's room for that to be very serious if AI starts to be used more and more in official capacities for development materials used by the government and public press releases and things like that. We'll see where that goes, but certainly an issue. There's some limitations with AI as far as their understanding of, human contexts and emotions and subjective experiences. Being a human is a complex thing. We are very tricky animals. Society and culture is a remarkable construct of the human experience that AI just really only understands through the context of what it's been trained on. It's really just kind of taking that information, trying to provide back what it thinks is going to be the best response to your question on it. So if you ask it some question like, hey, I'd really like you to generate me an image of what it was like when I first fell in love. Okay, well, love is already a tricky topic, but it doesn't really understand your subjective experience of when you fell in love, because it's going off of combined information about references to love across human society and history. So something that specific is going to be tricky for it. But hey, we'll see where things go, right? Other limitations are kind of more on a technical and engineering side. So to perform some of these capabilities that these tools are doing around generating content, it is not a small amount of compute power that is needed to do it. So one of the things that we may talk about more and more here in this channel is that AI tools running on really powerful servers takes a lot of electricity. And ultimately the limitations for some of these tools and how complicated answers they can provide solutions to, or how quickly they can turn answers around or generate new content, is oftentimes limited by the amount of servers and computers that are set aside to let those tools utilize while they're running. The more servers and computers they have available, and the faster those servers and computers are that they're using, well, the more quick and more substantial and remarkable the responses might be. And so the opposite, of course, is in the other direction. If those tools are not having available a lot of computer power, then it might take a while to get your response. But ultimately, computers and servers and all these machines, they run on electricity. And a lot of electricity is used just to even keep those computers cool in the data centers and facilities where they're housed. And so there are potential environmental impacts and concerns around the widespread use and continuing increase in use of some of these AI tools, because the more they're used, the more power they use. And when you use power, it's got to come from somewhere. A lot of times that can put all kinds of things into the environment that people are concerned about and debate about on a regular basis. So where can this go in the future? There's a lot of really interesting places it could go with generative AI. We talked about earlier about that subjective experience, having the development in the area of a better grasp of nuance and cultural subtleties. Ultimately, I think that's going to be one of the more tricky areas, because like I said, humans are complex, societies are complex, and there's so much variety and diversity in our world and how people interact. There's no monolithic human experience. So for AI to understand that, it's going to take a lot of training. And then similar to how that was connected, AI being tailored to individual users. Now, we're starting to see some of this be coming about with some of the advancements on Apple software with Siri and its Apple Intelligence. These providers, they're looking at ways to integrate the AI capabilities with this kind of graph of what it knows about us as in our personal standpoint, and how we're using tools already, and try and graft that information, those contexts together, so that tools like Siri or Copilot can provide much more nuanced and personalized responses to our questions, instead of providing some kind of response that is just general to any person out there who might ask it. But no, please answer my question in a way that is meaningful to me and my experience and the things that I do and things going on in my life. So there's already some of that coming about, and we know that we'll see more of that in the future. Real-time applications of this is going to be really compelling. It's going to need to be a lot more compute power for this type of dynamic content. But I think we're getting closer to the time frame when VR and virtual reality is going to be much more interesting. Certainly it's not anything new in the last couple of decades, and the technology keeps growing and advancing. But with AI, we see a lot more potential capabilities here to make it more compelling. And augmented reality is probably where, so AR, that's where that's going to be making an impact sooner. We're starting to see more examples of products at the marketplace, AR, augmented glasses, sunglasses, things, wearables that you can put on your face and utilize. Seen some examples recently of people wearing AR, augmented sunglasses connected with a computer, and they could go around, and the AI tools that it's running the software with those is using the camera and the glasses to automatically inspect the faces of people that they see as they walk down the street, and go ahead and look up databases like Facebooks and stuff like that to try and identify who these people are and provide information back in real time, the names and IDs of these folks. So these people testing it out are having conversations with folks alive on the street. Really amazing, kind of scary, I'll be honest, but still intriguing. And that is a direction where some of this stuff could be going. Not just, capturing data, but also potentially generating content for you live as you're using some of these tools like VR and AR. It's certainly integration with other technologies. So robotics is starting to really capture more of the public attention recently. There's a lot more research and investment going into that. It's not as much kind of a curiosity now and an area where people are just like, oh, that's neat. Man, I wonder when they'll actually do something. I think we're getting close. We're seeing more and more companies putting together humanoid type robots, be able to do certain types of tasks like working in a factory, but maybe even with more fine-tuned control, like in the home. That might be sooner than we think. The real key is once AI can be paired with those robotic devices, the game is really going to change. Now, of course, it's going to depend on a lot of things. There's limitations like, hey, you've got to be able to access the internet so you can phone home and get to the server. But we'll see it. At some point, this will get here. And how far out are we from having some kind of toy you can buy your kid for Christmas, a little fluffy stuffed animal, but it's got a computer inside and an AI model. And so when your kid talks to it, it's just not a pre-recorded message like we've seen for decades for the old school toy I had as a kid. Where the toy can talk back. It's like, hey, I love you. Let's sing a song. No, your kid might be actually having a conversation with it. Scary? Cool? You decide. But it's coming. And finally, enhanced collaboration. So we're starting to see some early examples of this. For instance, the Canvas tool component that's part of ChatGPT. So you can use that as a more integrated kind of content development pane inside the tool, a canvas really, as the name suggests. So you can write, and then, as you're writing, you can ask the tool to make adjustments to it, provide suggestions. So we're going to see more and more of that. These augmented business and content development type capabilities that are more compelling than just a chat bot tool where you just ask it questions and it provides stuff, but more readily integrated into the types of activities that we're trying to do. So where do we go from here? Well, it's here. Like I've said in previous occasions, this genie's not going back in the bottle. Generative AI is here. It's already having a lot of profound impacts on society, industry, economy, culture. I encourage everybody to try it out. See what it can do. It can be a little fun. It can be interesting. But see how it can help you in your work, in your life. If you're trying to come up with some ideas and I'll get started on writing a book or a blog post or something like that. It can be a really great way to help you get started with that. However, certainly there's a lot of risk that you just start letting it do it all for you, and maybe that's not so great either. Certainly if you're a student, there's a lot of attractiveness to use these tools to help you write your term paper or your thesis, that sort of thing, but it's very risky. And so my last point here is to be careful. Be careful in how much you go in and start using these tools, because ultimately, if you just let it take over doing what your original task was to do it for you, I mean, what are you actually doing? And if your work is dependent on, if your career is dependent on you being able to demonstrate your capability, if you don't have access to those tools, then where are you? And if your education is dependent on you being able to demonstrate your knowledge and you don't have access to those tools, then where are you? So that's why I say be careful. But certainly, I think there's no harm in trying these out. I think everybody will be well served to explore what generative AI can do and how it can fit into your life.